On this show, we often like to highlight stories that get overblown or exaggerated by the media on all sides of the political and ideological spectrum, and we have another high-profile example. It was dubbed Havana Syndrome, a mysterious illness supposedly plaguing the U.S. intelligence community for years. Everyone from diplomats to spies on the ground, even high-ranking officials stationed in at least 70 different countries, severely injured by an invisible weapon potentially wielded by a foreign enemy, possibly even on U.S. soil. A plot right out of a sci-fi novel or a Hollywood movie, and obviously perfect for the media.
But with a mysterious invisible weapon that terrorizes its victims with a lifetime of excruciating headaches.
Microwave-directed energy attacks. We know that there are several nations that have the capacity to do those kinds of attacks. Russia is one of those.
But now being used as a weapon by one or more hostile countries.
We are learning new details tonight about suspected directed energy microwave attacks targeting CIA officers and top national security officials.
Horrifying. And just this summer, the CIA has started making payments to agents suffering from traumatic brain injuries, presumably as a result of Havana Syndrome. The payments made possible by a law that's key premise is built on the assumption that the syndrome, as you heard in those reports, is connected to hostile attacks by a rival foreign power. But now, as Yahoo News' chief investigative correspondent Michael Isikoff reports, there's mounting skepticism from within the senior ranks of the government about the syndrome. Havana Syndrome got its name because the first people to report falling ill were CIA agents stationed in Cuba in late 2016. But since then, upwards of 1,000 government workers have reported similar cases of excruciating headaches, vertigo, nausea, vision and hearing difficulties, even memory loss. According to the Harvard Gazette, quote, many said they felt something pressing or vibrating around them or heard noises just before the symptoms appeared, leading some to suspect they'd been exposed to a high-intensity burst of energy or sound waves. CBS's 60 Minutes aired a half-hour report on the syndrome this summer. They interviewed Olivia Troy, former Homeland Security advisor to Vice President Pence, who said that 3 years ago she was attacked within the grounds of the security perimeter around the White House.
But it was like this piercing feeling on the side of my head. It was like, I remember it was on the right side of my head, and I got like vertigo. I was unsteady. I felt nauseous. I was somewhat disoriented, and I remember thinking like, okay, if you don't fall down the stairs, like you've got to find your ground again and steady yourself. There is a human aspect of it, of shame, and do you really want to admit you're sick? Do you want to come forward and tell someone that, especially as a member of the intelligence community?
Now, obviously, whatever she went through was incredibly painful and traumatic. And if she was targeted while in her capacity as a government servant, of course, she deserves to be compensated for that. But an interim report issued by the CIA in January determined that, quote, a majority of the 1,000 cases reported to the government can be explained by environmental causes, undiagnosed medical conditions, or stress, rather than a sustained global campaign by a foreign power. That followed a State Department study, which was declassified in 2021 and, quote, dismissed the theory that microwave weapons are behind the mysterious neurological injuries in diplomats worldwide. In fact, the study put the blame for a handful of the original 21 cases on a particularly loud species of crickets. Those reports, of course, upset victims who were suffering from illnesses, who felt the initial government response was dismissive of their real suffering. Another report by a panel of experts convened by the Biden administration in February concluded that at least in some 10 or 20 of the cases, the possibility of Havana Syndrome couldn't be dismissed. Quote, stress or psychosomatic reactions could not explain some of the incidents of Havana Syndrome. They had interviewed and said that radio waves could have caused some of the injuries among CIA officers and diplomats. But those cases don't actually contradict the government's previous findings, which again didn't find sufficient proof to connect the illnesses to attacks by Russia or China or Cuba or anyone else. Michael Isikoff is host of Conspiracy Land, a new podcast series that has spoken with high-ranking government officials and former members of the intelligence community who are increasingly doubtful that outside actors are behind this. And he joins us now. Michael, thanks a lot for taking the time. Appreciate it. All right, so talk to me about why this became a thing that seemed so certain for a while and why there's now so much more skepticism about it.
Well, first of all, people did get sick. There's no question about that. And some people are still suffering. And in our Conspiracy Land podcast, we interview some of those people who are experiencing real cognitive issues, real problems as a result of illnesses that have never been adequately explained. No question about that. And there's no reason to question or doubt the sincerity or the veracity of people who have reported some of these symptoms. But that said, every single one of those clips you played at the start of this segment, there is simply no evidence to back any of it up. The CIA task force appointed by Director Bill Burns went all over the world investigating every one of these incidents, and they concluded they could find no evidence of any foreign involvement, any foreign attack in any one of these instances, even in the ones where there are perplexing ongoing symptoms, including brain injuries that some people have suffered. So the media has adopted this. It's a conspiracy theory that is essentially evidence-free at this point. What weapon? Who is wielding it? Where does it exist? What does it look like? These are phantom weapons involving phantom attacks. I talked to senior officials, some of whom, by the way, started out believing there had to be something there. John Cohen, who's chief of intel at the Department of Homeland Security, interviewed on my podcast. He says he was a believer at first. The more he looked into it, the more he studied the evidence, the more he looked at everything that was out there, and he concluded it's just not there. Show me the facts, he says. Show me the evidence, and nobody ever could.
Yeah, I want to play that piece of sound from your podcast, from John Cohn, when you did that interview. If we have that, let's play it now.
But with a mysterious, invisible weapon that terrorizes its...
I don't think we have it. But the point is obvious, and it relates specifically, though, to Cuba. In some of these cases, how it started in Havana. At that point, there were a lot of different people, right, who were saying they were suffering from the same sorts of maladies. And isn't that the reason so many people came to believe that this was a targeted effort?
Well, you go back to 2017, and there are about 24 intelligence officers and diplomats at the U.S. Embassy in Havana who reported some symptoms along these lines. Some of them serious, some of them less serious. Immediately, the Trump administration jumped all over this and blamed the Cubans. Rex Tillerson, who was the Secretary of State, called it a targeted attack. Donald Trump said these are bad things are happening in Cuba. They're doing bad things there. Marco Rubio and Bob Menendez, the two Cuban Americans in the United Senate, jumped all over this and blamed the Cubans in what they described as sophisticated attacks, even though there was simply no evidence, no fingerprints of Cuban involvement at all. It's significant because it completely upended U.S. relations with Cuba. Remember, Barack Obama went down to Cuba in 2015, normalized relations, ending a half century of Cold War policies toward Cuba, trying to open up American relations, bring back tourists and all that. Once Havana Syndrome hit, that put a stop to it. Yeah. Trump did it first, but then Biden has continued the squeeze on Cuba. Yeah. And in our podcast, there's some really amazing remarks from Ben Rhodes, former Obama aide, criticizing Biden on this.
Out of time. Michael Isikoff, thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.